The night in New York was bustling as usual, with the lights of the skyscrapers illuminating the sky and the sound of hurried taxis echoing through the streets. However, inside billionaire Alexander McGregor's imposing penthouse, the atmosphere was one of pure luxury and tension. Alexander, a man known for his overwhelming charm and womanizing lifestyle, was hunched over a contract. His confident smile and piercing gaze concealed his growing irritation as he read through the clauses. On the other side of the table, Emily Carter, a young woman of humble origins, remained serious. Her simple dress contrasted with the sophistication around her, but her firm posture and the determined sparkle in her eyes caught Alexander's attention in a way he couldn't explain. Emily was a virgin, and this wasn't just a detail in her life. It was a promise she had made to herself. Her father, before passing away, had made it clear that true love was a rare treasure, something she should protect. So when the proposal for a contractual marriage, a marriage that would ensure financial stability for her ailing mothers, accepted it on one condition: nothing would happen between them before the wedding. You're kidding, right? Alexander finally broke the silence, throwing the contract onto the table. His voice was deep and slightly sarcastic. You seriously think I, Alexander McGregor, am going to wait months for that? Emily didn't flinch. It's this or nothing, Mr. McGregor. The contract is clear. If you're not willing to comply, we can end the conversation now. Alexander narrowed his eyes, intrigued. No woman had ever dared to challenge him like this. He was used to getting everything he wanted, whenever he wanted. Yet something about Emily disarmed him. She was different, at the kind of different he usually sought, but something in him wanted to find out more. Why are you doing this? Alexander asked, crossing his arms. Money? Is that it? Emily took a deep breath, trying not to let her voice tremble. My mother is sick. Treatments are expensive, and your proposal is my only chance to help her. But I have my boundaries, Mr. McGregor. This is about more than money, it's about principles. Alexander leaned forward, analyzing every detail of her face. She wasn't joking. He knew he had the power to buy anything and anyone, but Emily didn't seem to be for sale. Fine, he finally said with a cynical smile. I'll sign. But know that you're playing with fire. Emily took the contract, feeling a wave of relief mixed with apprehension. She knew that stepping into his world was dangerous, but she had no choice that night. As Alexander watched Emily leave his penthouse with the contract in hand, he felt something unusual. He couldn't pinpoint whether it was irritation, fascination, or a dangerous mix of both. Meanwhile, Emily walked through the illuminated streets, trying to suppress the feeling that she had just made a pact with the devil. And so, the game began. The days after signing the contract passed with the intensity of a hurricane. Emily barely had time to adjust to her new reality. She now lived in Alexander's mansion, a monumental property whose halls echoed elegance and power. Yet the oppressive luxury only served to highlight the chasm between her humble roots and the world she now found herself in. On her first morning, Emily came downstairs for breakfast, trying not to feel out of place. The long marble table, adorned with expensive dishes and gleaming silverware, looked more like a display than something meant to be used. Alexander was seated at the head of the table, a coffee cup in hand. He wore an impeccable suit, as though already prepared to take on the world. Did you sleep well? He asked, not lifting his eyes from the newspaper. Yes, thank you, Emily replied, sitting quietly. But Alexander wasn't known for letting silence linger comfortably. He put the newspaper down and looked directly at her. You know, Emily, you're living in my space now. I think it's only fair for you to be part of my life. She glanced up, suspicious. What do you mean? Alexander gave her a crooked smile. There's an event tonight, charity auction. I want you to come with me. It'll be our first public appearance. As a couple, Emily was taken aback. You want to parade me around like a trophy? I want you to fulfill your part of the contract, he retorted sharply. Pretending to be my fiancé doesn't mean hiding out in the mansion. I need you by my side. Emily pressed her lips together but nodded. He was right, had signed the contract, and knew moments like these would be inevitable. Emily found herself thrust into a world of designer gowns, dazzling jewelry, and insincere smiles. Xander seemed completely at ease, gliding through the crowd with charm and confidence. Emily, on the other hand, felt every judgmental stare directed her way. Was the outsider, the girl who didn't belong. "Relax," Alexander whispered, noticing her tension. "You're with meth, that's all that matters." While his words were somewhat comforting, his tone carried an arrogance that irritated her. Before she could respond, a stunning woman approached Blonde, tall and dressed to impress. She touched Alexander's arm with familiarity. "Alex, darling, I can't believe you finally brought someone to meet society." The woman looked at Emily with a venomous smile. "I'm Vanessa, an old friend." Emily forced a polite smile. Alexander, however, seemed uncomfortable. "Vanessa, this is Emily, my fiancée." Word echoed like a bomb in Emily's mind. She hadn't expected him to use that title so casually. Vanessa, however, didn't seem convinced. "It's interesting," Vanessa said, glancing between Emily and Alexander. "You don't seem like the type of man to settle down like this." Emily felt her face burn. Before the conversation could worsen, one of the organizers announced the start of the auction. Alexander seized the opportunity to lead Emily to a table away from Vanessa. "Who was she?" Emily asked, her voice low but brimming with curiosity. "Old complication," Alexander replied, offering no further details. The auction began, and Alexander didn't hesitate to make outrageously high bids, flaunting the weight of his fortune. Emily couldn't help but feel out of place. But what truly unsettled her was the way Vanessa watched them from a distance. Her gaze predatory. By the end of the evening, as they returned to the mansion, Emily was exhausted. However, Alexander seemed more intrigued than ever. During the drive, he broke the silence. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "I didn't expect you to be so composed." "It's what happens when you learn to survive," Emily replied. Alexander chuckled, but there was something different in his tone. He looked at her for a few seconds longer than he should have, as though seeing something he hadn't noticed before. "You're different, Emily," he finally said. "That intrigues me." She met his gaze, trying to ignore the sudden quickening of her heartbeat. "I'm not here to intrigue you, Alexander. I'm here to fulfill my part of the contract, that's all." But as Alexander's eyes held hers, Emily realized something had changed that evening. The game between them was just beginning, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay ahead. The sound of Emily's heels echoed through the vast marble hall of the mansion as she tried to contain her irritation. The night at the auction was over, but Vanessa's words still lingered in her mind like a ghost. The presence of that woman had stirred something Emily couldn't, ignoragelousy. It wasn't something she wanted to feel, but Alexander had a peculiar way of provoking contradictory emotions. As she made her way toward the room designated for her, she heard Alexander's voice behind her. "Running away?" he asked, his tone laced with sarcasm, though his footsteps were unhurried. Emily stopped and turned slowly. He was standing in the middle of the corridor, his jacket casually draped over his shoulder. The cynical smile on his face only irritated her further. "I'm not running away," she replied, lifting her chin. "I'm just exhausted." Alexander took a few steps toward her, closing the distance between them. "You seemed much more awake when Vanessa was around. Any problem with her?" Emily crossed her arms, trying not to reveal how much his comment bothered her. "Have a problem? Seems like you're the one with unresolved issues with her." Alexander raised an eyebrow, surprised by Emily's boldness. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone who was supposed to simply honor a contract. "Vanessa is the past," he said firmly, his voice steady. "You are the present." Emily's heart unexpectedly skipped a beat, but she maintained her composure. "Well, I hope your past doesn't interfere with our agreement." Alexander studied her for a long moment, as if weighing every word she had just said. Then he smiled, net his usual arrogant smile, but something more genuine, something that completely disarmed her. "You're full of surprises, Emily," he said before. Stepping away and disappearing down the corridor, Emily stood there, trying to decipher why those simple words carried so much weight. She knew she was treading into dangerous territory, where emotions could complicate everything. The next day, Alexander insisted that Emily accompanied him to a business meeting at an exclusive club. Though reluctant, she understood it was part of the contract. When they arrived, the venue was as opulent as expected, filled with powerful men in expensive suits and women draped in stunning gowns. Alexander seemed perfectly at ease, charming everyone with his usual charisma. Emily, however, felt like a fish out of water. This became even more evident when a young socialite approached, completely ignoring Emily's presence. "Alex, the woman," said, touching his arm with familiarity. "It's so good to see you again. Can we talk in private?" Emily felt her blood boil, but kept silent. Alexander, however, glanced quickly at Emily before responding. "I can't, Sophie," he said casually. "I'm here with my fiancé." Sophie finally acknowledged Emily, sizing her up with a fake smile. "Fiancé, interesting. You have peculiar taste." "Alex." Emily clenched her fists, but before she could respond, Alexander intervened. "And I'm more than satisfied with my taste. Now, if you'll excuse us." He gently took Emily's arm, guiding her away from the woman. Once they were at a safe distance, Emily abruptly stopped. "Why did you say that?" she demanded, her voice tinged with frustration. "Say what?" Alexander asked, feigning confusion. "That you're satisfied with me? You don't even believe that?" Alexander smirked, leaning in slightly closer. "You underestimate how much you intrigue me, Emily." She tried to ignore the warmth, rising to her face. "This is just a game to you, isn't it? A challenge?" He didn't answer. He simply looked at her, and in that moment, Emily realized there was something about Alexander she still didn't understand, something that made him as enigmatic as he was infuriating. Later that night, Emily found herself wandering the corridors of the mansion. She needed a moment to herself, away from Alexander and all the complications he brought. That was when she came across a slightly ajar door. Curiosity got the better of her, and she peeked inside. What she saw made her freeze. Alexander was seated in a leather chair, holding a picture frame. He looked distant, almost vulnerable, a side of him Emily had never imagined. Without realizing she was there, he spoke softly, as if to someone who wasn't present. "If only you were still here, I'd never have become this." Emily silently stepped back, feeling as though she had intruded on something deeply personal. For the first time, she wondered if Alexander harbored wounds as profound as her own. Perhaps he wasn't just an arrogant womanizer, but someone broken inside. The following days, Emily tried to keep her distance from Alexander. Each encounter felt like a dangerous dance, where words cut like blades, yet their gazes betrayed an underlying tension neither dared to acknowledge. However, avoiding Alexander in his own mansion proved impossible. He seemed to be everywhere, as though her presence intrigued him too much to leave her out of his orbit. That morning, as she quietly sipped her coffee in the mansion's garden, Emily sensed his presence before she even saw him. The air seemed to charge electrically, an unspoken warning of his arrival. "Running from me again?" Alexander asked casually, sitting at the table. He appeared absurdly relaxed, but his eyes gleamed with that dangerous mix of curiosity and challenge. "Didn't know the garden was exclusively yours," Emily replied without lifting her eyes. He laughed at a deep, genuine sound that caught her off guard. "It's not, but I couldn't help noticing you've been avoiding any chance for us to talk." Emily set her cup down and finally looked at him. "I'm not avoiding you, Alexander. I'm just trying to find some balance in this situation." He tilted his head, studying her intently. "And are you finding it?" She sighed, exasperated. "Do you actually care, or is this just another one of your games?" Alexander didn't respond immediately. Instead, he picked a flower from the arrangement on the table and began twirling it between his fingers. "You think everything is a game to me, don't you?" he finally said. Emily shot back, holding his gaze. "You live surrounded by luxury, power, and people who do whatever you want. Of course, it seems like a game." Alexander returned the flower too, the vase, but his gaze remained fixed on her. "And you're wrong, Emily. Not everything in life is a game." Some things are far more complicated. Before she could reply, a staff member appeared, handing Alexander an envelope. He opened it quickly, and the confident smile that usually adorned his face vanished instantly. Emily noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. "Is there a problem?" she asked, surprising herself with the concern in her voice. "None of your business," he replied abruptly, rising from his seat. However, before leaving, he paused and glanced over his shoulder. "If I were you, I'd stay away from the offices in the East Wing." Emily frowned, but before she could ask what he meant, Alexander was already gone. Her curiosity, however, was instantly piqued. Later that day, Emily couldn't resist the temptation to explore the East Wing. It was a part of the mansion she hadn't seen yet, and Alexander's words felt more like an invitation than a warning. "Fucking." Through the silent corridors, she eventually found what appeared to be an office. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The walls were covered with photographs or photos of her. Pictures of her at the hospital, visiting her mother, at her old apartment, even walking to the grocery store. Some were dated weeks before their first meeting, but what truly shocked her was a folder on the desk, labeled Emily Carter Background. Investigation. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were details about her life she had never shared with anyone: her father's death, her mother's medical condition, her financial struggles, even her promise of virginity. "I see you found my little insurance policy." Emily spun around to find Alexander standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You've been watching me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Before we even met. This whole thinked contract, the marriage proposal, it was all planned." Alexander stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I needed to know who I was dealing with." "Who you were dealing with?" Emily's voice rose with fury. "I'm not a business transaction, Alexander. I'm a human being. In my world, everyone is a potential threat or asset," he said coldly. "I had to know which one you were." Emily felt sick. "And what did you decide?" For the first time since she'd known him, Alexander seemed to struggle for words. "It's complicated." "No, it's not," Emily shouted, throwing the folder at him. Papers scattered across the floor. "You manipulated me. You knew exactly how desperate I was, exactly what buttons to push." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I gave you what you needed. Your mother is getting the best care money can buy. At what cost?" Emily's eyes filled with tears of rage and betrayal. "You made me believe I had a choice, that I had some control over my life. But you orchestrated everything." Alexander moved closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You still have choices, Emily. You can leave right now. Walk away from all of this, and let my mother die." Emily laughed bitterly. "You know, I can't do that. You've made sure of it. And stop acting like a victim," Alexander snapped. "Got what you want, Ted, financial security for your mother. Got what I want, Ted, a convenient fiancé. It's a fair trade." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "Is that really what you think this is? A trade?" Something flickered in Alexander's ice vulnerability. Perhaps. Or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He asked, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. Emily wiped her tears, straightening her shoulders. "You're right. But don't expect me to pretend theirs." "Anything more to it?" She pushed past him toward the door, but Alexander caught her wrist. "Emily, wait." She turned, and for a moment the mask slipped completely from his face. She saw the man she'd glimpsed in the chair with the photograph written. Vulnerable. Afraid. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't you dare try to make this about something it's not. You made your choice when you decided to spy on me, to manipulate me. I may be trapped in this contract, but I won't be your fool." She pulled free from his grasp and walked out, leaving Alexander standing alone among the scattered paper survivance of his carefully constructed web of deceit. 3 weeks passed in tense silence. Emily and Alexander maintained the pretense of their engagement in public, but privately, they were strangers sharing the same house. Emily threw herself into caring for her mother, who was responding well to the treatments. Alexander buried himself in work, though Emily noticed he looked increasingly haggard. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Emily was returning from the hospital when she found Vanessa waiting in the mansion's foyer, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against her designer purse. "Well, well," Vanessa purred. "If it isn't Alex's little charity case." "What do you want?" Emily asked, too emotionally drained for pleasantries. Vanessa smiled like a predator. "I thought you should know the truth about your precious fiancé. Did he tell you about Sarah?" Emily's blood chilled, remembering the photograph Alexander had been holding. "Who's Sarah?" "His sister. Sweet little thing, about your age when she died. Car accident thaw. Some say it was suicide. She found out about Alex's business practices, the people he'd destroyed to build his empire. Couldn't live with being related to a monster." Emily felt the world tilt. "You're lying. Might check the newspapers from 3 years ago. Died age 24, died in a single car collision, no other vehicles involved.
Alex
Never talks about her, does he? Too guilty." Vanessa leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "He sees her in you, you know? Same age, same innocence, same stubborn streak.
Alex.
This whole contract isn't about convenience, that's about penance. He's trying to save you because he couldn't save her." After Vanessa left, Emily sat in the garden where she'd had her last real conversation with Alexander. Her mind raced with this new information. Everything suddenly made sense: his protectiveness, his fascination with her principles, even his surveillance. He hadn't been hunting prey. He'd been guarding her. Dad. Evening, Emily found Alexander in his study, staring at a half-empty whiskey glass. "Sarah," she said quietly. Alexander's hand froze halfway to his mouth. He didn't look at her. "Vanessa, I assume. Why didn't you tell me?" Alexander set down the glass and finally met her eyes. They were red-rimmed, haunted. "What was I supposed to say? That I'm using you to assuage my guilt over my sister's death? That every time I look at you I see her?" Emily stepped into the room. "You could have told me the truth." "The truth?" Alexander laughed bitterly. "The truth is that Sarah killed herself because she found out what kind of man I really am. She discovered that I'd destroyed families to build my fortune, that I'd used people and discarded them. She couldn't bear being my sister, and you've been trying to save me ever since." Alexander stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You don't need saving. You're stronger than she was." "But you couldn't take that risk," Emily said, understanding flooding through her. "So you investigated me, controlled every variable, made sure I'd never be in a position to be hurt by your world." "I failed her," Alexander whispered, his voice breaking. "She was the only good thing in my life, and I failed her." Emily moved closer, seeing him clearly for the first time. "She made her own choices, Alexander, just like I'm making mine." He turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I never meant for you to get hurt. The surveillance, the manipulation. I was trying to protect you by controlling me." "Yes," he admitted. "Because I couldn't bear to lose someone else." He stopped abruptly. "Someone else you what?" Alexander closed his eyes, the words seeming to tear from his throat. "Someone else I love." The admission hung in the air between them. Emily felt her heart race, but she forced herself to think clearly. "Love built on lies isn't love, Alexander. It's obsession." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I'm tearing up the contract." Emily stared at him in shock. "What?" Alexander walked to his desk and pulled out a thick document. "Your mother's treatments are paid for permanently. There's a trust fund that will cover all her medical expenses for life. You're free to go." Emily's mind reeled. "Just like that? Just like that. I won't trap you anymore. I won't be the person who destroys another innocent soul." Emily looked at the contract, then at Alexander. She thought of her mother, recovering beautifully. She thought of the past months, the anger and betrayal, but also the moments of genuine connection, the way he'd defended her, the vulnerability she'd seen in unguarded moments. "What if I don't want to go?" Alexander's head snapped up. "What?" Emily took a deep breath. "What if I choose to stay in it because of a contract? Not because I'm trapped, but because I choose to." "Emily, You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly. You're a complicated, damaged man who's done terrible things. You've also shown me kindness, protected me in your twisted way, and just sacrificed everything to give me freedom. Maybe Sarah couldn't forgive you, but maybe I can. Alexander stared at her in disbelief. I manipulated you. I spied on you. I trapped you in a contract. Yes, you did. If we're going to have any chance at something real, you'll never do anything like that again. Complete honesty, complete trust, or I walk away. You'd give me another chance? Emily smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I'd give us a chance, but I have conditions. We start over properly this time. No contracts, no arrangements. Just two people getting to know each other honestly. Alexander moved toward her hesitantly, as though afraid she might disappear. And if I can't be the man you deserve, then I'll leave. But this time, it will be my choice. Alexander reached for her hands, and for the first time his touch felt gentle rather than possessive. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, Emily said softly, but you might earn me. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. I love you, Emily. Not because you remind me of Sarah, but because you're strong enough to see the worst of me and still believe I can be better. Then be better, she whispered. Alexander pulled her into his arms, and Emily realized that this was what she'd been searching for all along, not security or financial stability, but someone who would choose her every day, just as she was choosing him. 6 months later, Emily stood in the same garden where they'd had so many of their conversations. She was wearing her mother's wedding dress, simple but elegant. Her mother, healthy and radiant, was crying happy tears in the front row. Alexander waited at the altar, looking nervous for the first time since she'd known him. When their eyes met, he smiled, not his practiced, charming smile, but something real and vulnerable and completely his own. Do you, Emily Carter, take Alexander McGregor to be your husband? The officiant asked. Emily looked at the man who had manipulated her, protected her, challenged her, and ultimately freed her to choose her own path. I do, she said, meaning it completely. When Alexander kissed her as his wife, Emily knew that their story was just beginning. It wouldn't always be easy loving a complicated man never was, but it would be real, built on choice rather than circumstance, on truth rather than convenient fiction. As they walked back down the aisle together, Emily caught sight of a framed photograph of Sarah on a small memorial table. Alexander had insisted on including her in the ceremony, not as a ghost to haunt their marriage, but as a blessing on their new beginning. Emily squeezed Alexander's hand, and he squeezed back, his eyes bright with tears and hope. Their contract had ended, but their real story was just beginning. Asterisk the end. Asterisk asterisk. Like this video if the story touched your heart.
Press subscribe for more emotional
tales, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love, and let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.